Jeanette, thanks for being here this morning. We're going to talk about the planned use of federal forces in Chicago coming up in just a minute. But first, let's go back to the Jeffrey Epstein birthday card. White House still denying that President Trump had anything to do with it. So why not just own up and say, yeah, I wrote that and move on?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, Jim. Not sure. It's interesting. I don't think this is going to stop, right? Thousands of documents released in the Epstein files. You heard survivors last week calling for full transparency. Republicans, Democrats, this has become a bipartisan issue. Constituents are calling congressional office. They want full transparency. Thousands of documents have been turned over. You're going to see more of this, and I don't think that it's going to let up anytime soon. I don't. I'm not privy to what's happening in the White House or what their rationale is, so I can't really say why they're not owning up to it. But what they have said is that this is not his handwriting. He never wrote this.
Yeah, Jeanette, I think you're right. Absolutely. Because even when it goes away for a while, it bubbles back up. There are Democrats who are trying to keep this front of mind, and there are all sorts of Republicans led by basically, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene
Mhm.
and that faction who are keeping it front of mind. Okay, let's talk about what President Trump is doing in terms of sending the National Guard into cities. At the moment, he's only sending them into Democrat run cities, not even though there are many Republican run cities that have a higher crime rate, such as Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri, Birmingham, Alabama. So how are people to make sense of his claim that this is really about, cutting down on crime rather than politics?
Well, Allison, he hasn't sent in the National Guard on crime yet. He keeps threatening it. It's been about a month. We don't even know if he's going to do it. And he posted that meme about, I love the smell of deportations in the morning. This is what the Department of War is. All of this stuff, right? And everyone lost their mind. Like, how dare the American president declare war on an American city? All this stuff. This is classic Trump, right? He does these things to provoke the left, and the response immediately from the White House, and I'm going to predict it, is you care more about a meme, which is obviously not serious, than the actual violent crime in the cities, right? That is what the response is going to be. But you notice he sent the National Guard into California, into Los Angeles, to protect federal assets because under the law he was able to do so. And now, just on September 3rd, a federal court said that was not constitutional and it wasn't legal. So he has not done that again because under the law, he would have to invoke the Insurrection Act. And Mark, who's an attorney, knows better about the law than I do. I'm not going to play a lawyer on TV. So, to go into Chicago or to go to any of these other cities about crime, he would have to invoke the Insurrection Act or something very, very dramatic, right? So he hasn't done that yet. DC is a federal city, so that's different, right? To use the National Guard in DC, it's a federal city. He has a different jurisdiction there. There's talk about Charlotte now in North Carolina. There was a fatal stabbing on the train the other day. So that's another story right there.
Jeanette, focusing on crime, in Washington, D.C., we've seen a once reluctant mayor express support for federal crime-fighting forces, while Chicago's mayor and other local officials are adamantly against it. Do you think they could have a change of heart in the initial results if they're successful? Or does this resistance, do you think, harden and turn the battle into something that some are threatening?
Well, it depends. I mean, the mayor of DC said, "Hey, I'm for it." Carjackings are down, crime is down. She has been a partner in this whole crime reduction in the city of DC. Now, other mayors and Allison, you pointed out that their Democratic cities are very resistant. JB Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, potential presidential candidate in the future, is very against it. And another thing that's classic Trump, he's putting these Democrats on their heels and saying, well, maybe crime isn't that bad and there's an acceptable amount of crime in the cities. So you have Democrats kind of saying like, well, crime isn't such a bad thing. And that's not really a good look for the Democratic Party. So we'll have to wait and see if he really does deploy these troops, deploy the National Guard to take on crime, or if this is just more, getting Democrats to, look rather weak on crime.
At the same time, polls over the summer, majority of Chicago residents are opposed to these raids. But doesn't this just add more fuel to the Democrats' fire?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen over the past several days huge, huge protests in Chicago, saying, abolish ICE, don't come to my city, all of these things. So, I'm not sure if they're eventually going to go into Chicago. We know that there's going to be huge ICE raids and going after illegal immigration and certainly criminals in Chicago. But whether the National Guard will be deployed to crack down on crime, that remains to be seen.
All right, Jeanette Hoffman, thanks so much for joining us this morning on Connecting America. And coming up in our next hour here, we're going to hear from liberal commentator Ahmed Baba on his take as ICE and the National Guard could become a regular presence in cities across America. So don't go away. And this brings us to our question of the day. Would you welcome the National Guard in your local area? Yes or no? You can scan that QR code there on your screen and weigh in. So far, a resounding yes right now. But we're going to check on that outcome as we move through the next couple of hours.
I'm not sure how big the sample
I'm
size
not
is
either.
yet
I was
at
gonna
this
say.
hour. That's 100%, because if that were true, it would be the opposite of what the other national polls are showing this week.
Exactly.
CBS just did a poll that shows that 58% of respondents are against the National Guard in cities. So we'll see how that bakes over the breakfast
Exactly.
hours. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. The Supreme Court playing a key role in the second Trump administration on everything from deportations to DOJ-related firings, tariffs, and more. Democrats are complaining the 6-3 conservative majority is always siding with President Trump now, but one of the newest appointees to the bench says, check her record. Justice Amy Coney Barrett recently sat down for an interview with USA Today Supreme Court reporter Maureen Grappi, and we are happy to have Maureen with us this morning. Rare chance to spend an hour with Justice Barrett. So what are some of your big takeaways from your talk with her, your interview?
Yeah, you're right. It is very rare to get to have an on-the-record conversation with a Supreme Court justice. And myself and my bureau chief, Susan Page, we got an hour with her. She's promoting her book that's out today, Listening to the Law, in which she is trying to explain to non-lawyers how the Supreme Court works and hopefully try to persuade some Americans that the way the justices make their decisions